Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about the issue of human extinction, specifically the question of whether the disappearance of the human species would be a bad thing. To start, I just want to mention that this question isn't simply a matter of some wild speculative scenario that we can imagine, but it's a very real possibility. Uh, so the vast majority of species that have ever existed on Earth have gone extinct, and there's no particular reason to think that human beings should be an exception to that rule. Secondly, when we look at our current situation, there are risks of extinction all around us, whether it's through nuclear catastrophe, some sort of self-imposed environmental or biological disaster, or some unexpected natural event like a gamma ray burst or an asteroid impact that devastates life on Earth, including that of the human species. The question, of course, is when and how this is likely to occur, and I have no idea about that, of course. I don't know whether it would happen in the next few decades or if we're looking at millions or even billions of years in the future. But sooner or later, it's reasonable to expect that the human species will simply not exist any longer, either because we've been wiped out by some cause, or perhaps because we've changed our own biology to the point where we're no longer biologically human. Lots of different sci-fi scenarios that are possible. So the question I want to ask is the likely fact that humanity will go extinct at some point. Is that fact something to regret, something to judge to be a misfortune, something bad in some sense? And I'm not really asking a moral question here, so I'm not really asking whether it would be morally good or bad for humanity to disappear. So you might say, of course, it would be wrong for someone to press a button to kill all humans on Earth. That would be pretty messed up. But let's just consider the fact of humanity disappearing. Would that in and of itself be a loss of value for the world on the whole? Would it be a bad thing? Would the universe be a worse place? And there's lots of reasons to think the answer might be yes, of course. And that's probably the obvious answer. Most people, I suspect, would say that, well, obviously human extinction would be a bad thing. Some examples as to what would be lost is the value of human relationships, the joy that people feel through various activities, the productions that human beings make, so whether it's artistic production, architectural, or something else. We've built a lot of things and written a lot of things, designed a lot of things, and many of us judge there to be some kind of value there. So you might say, if all of those things, all the things that make human life worth living, right? The things we produce, the experiences we have, the relationships we enjoy with one another, if all that just disappeared, that would be a loss, surely. And at first that seems obviously true, but then we have to ask ourselves the question, perhaps, for whom or for what would it be a bad thing if that stuff went away? Remember, we're talking about the disappearance of the entire species, so there are no human beings left on Earth. They're all completely gone. So it won't be the case that there's some person wandering around a wasteland saying, man, it's a shame that human civilization went away. I'm really missing out on that. This world really sucks now. There won't be anybody thinking that or saying that or feeling that because there won't be anyone at all, right? There'll be no human persons, at least. There may still be animals, and maybe some of them would be worse off, but we'll come back to that in a minute. So that's the first challenge, to thinking that human extinction would be a bad thing. You might simply say, well, sure, a lot of things are lost, like art and other valuable things, but perhaps it won't matter because there won't be any human beings around to suffer from the fact or to be harmed by the fact that those things have been lost. So you might argue it's not really a bad thing, because to be bad, it has to be bad for someone. Another challenge is to say, well, even if we admit that losing all of those things in human life would be bad, perhaps it's outweighed by all of the bad stuff that would also go away. So if we look at the state of the world, human beings are pretty clearly a net negative on other species. With some exceptions, like maybe some rats and pigeons and certain microorganisms that benefit from our presence, for the most part, we're a force of destruction, at least at the present time. So we're arguably in the midst of another mass extinction in Earth's history. This one caused by human beings. So, for example, overfishing, destroying habitat of non-human organisms. A lot of species are disappearing, and a lot of individual members of those species are suffering and dying because of our activities. So biodiversity in the world is taking a pretty big hit from us. From the point of view of a environmentally flourishing world, you might say the disappearance of humanity would be a really good thing. That yes, we lose art and human relationships, and that, let's admit, that counts as something bad, but perhaps it's greatly outweighed by the ecological good our disappearance would do. You would suddenly take away the number one threat, frankly, to life on Earth, which is our species at the present time. And you would, arguably, let's say, have greater biodiversity, greater flourishing of organisms, more species surviving, many fewer going extinct as a result of our actions. Now, I don't know how to measure these two things up. Right? I don't know how to put a number on the good stuff that would be lost if humans disappeared, and then put a number on the bad stuff that would disappear if humans were lost. But it's at least plausible to think that the good could outweigh the bad in that case. And from the perspective of most non-human species, it would seem pretty clear that it does. Right? It at least seems very plausible to think that. So that's another reason to think that human extinction might not be a bad thing. There are a variety of other considerations that we might make. So philosophers have written on this topic quite a bit and thought about this. It seems intuitively, as a matter of common sense, of course our extinction would be bad, we want to stop that. But when you sit down and try to specify the reasons, it's not so obvious that it's bad. Because if it were so obvious, then you would think we'd be able to specify the reasons pretty clearly. But every possible explanation that I've heard runs into problems, and I've given you a couple examples so far. I'll end with just one more. So if the human species goes extinct, then that deprives the future of future human beings, obviously, right? If we die off now, we're not going to be producing more humans in the coming decades, centuries, or millennia. You might think, well, just as losing actual good things, like the art that we produce or the relationships that we had, would be a bad thing, so it would be bad to lose possible future goods. All the good stuff that would have been in the world thanks to future human lives has now been taken away if we go extinct tomorrow, let's say. And you might think that's a bad thing. And there seems like there's some plausibility to that, but again, we come back to a similar problem as to what we saw before. For whom would it be a bad thing that no future humans exist? It wouldn't be bad for those future humans themselves, right? They wouldn't exist, so it's not like they would be sitting around regretting the fact that they were never born. And unless you believe in some sort of reincarnation or something, those people can't be victims, because if they never existed, then there's no way that they could have been harmed. So again, it's hard to specify. You might want to say, well, it wouldn't be bad for those future humans, but it would be bad for something else, maybe for certain animal species, again, like rats or pigeons, that they like our cities. But on the whole, again, we come back to that other point. It seems like it would probably be a good thing for most life on Earth, for the majority of species, if human beings just went away. We don't contribute a lot from their point of view, right? If you take the point of view of, say, a coral reef ecosystem, I'm sure there are exceptions here and there, but for the most part, we're destroying those ecosystems. So if you were a non-human organism that was capable of having these thoughts, you might say, well, of course I want humans to disappear, because if they do, then the rest of us can finally get on living our lives. Okay, so those are roughly 3 reasons to be suspicious of the claim that human extinction is bad, something that we usually take for granted, I think. And I don't know what the right answer is here. I don't know that human extinction would be a good thing, but it's not as simple as it might seem at first. So let me know what you think, and thanks for listening.